Okay, everybody, good morning. Boker Tov, good to have you. We would like to dedicate this morning's shir in memory of Michelle's mother, Le'ilui Nishmas, Naomi Bat Shlomo, and in memory of Sue's father, Le'ilui Nishmat, Mordechai ben Shaul. And in memory of Carol's mother, Ginendel Bat Yosef. So I had actually the zchut to know all three people, and certainly it's meaningful for me to be able to say over this shir in their memory. How many years? 14 years. How many years? 26? That's impossible. And this is year one for you, right? Okay. I mean, I don't know if year one is any easier than year 26. I'm not sure, but right, it's different. It's different. It's different. Yeah. Yeah, I remember. I remember your father. Okay. So we're going to continue page 848, beginning of chapter 21.
Okay.
We'll come to the sheet in just a moment. So the Torah tells us that the Kanaani, this king of Arad, who is dwelling in the south, hears that Israel is coming derech ha'asarim, and vayilachem beYisrael vayesh mimenu shevi. That this king comes to do battle against the Jewish people, and he takes a captive. Okay, so we have a couple of things that are not so clear from this pasuk. First is we know that this king heard Vayishma HaKinaani Melech Arad, and we'll talk in a few moments about who he was. But we know that he heard something. What did he hear? He heard that Aharon had died. How did he hear that Aharon had died? Because we learned the Gemara, it's a Gemara in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, that the cloud of glory, right, the clouds that covered Bnei Yisrael dissipated with Aaron's death. He thought that Bnei Yisrael were now vulnerable, and therefore he came and attacked Bnei Yisrael. Okay, and that's Rashi. If you look at Rashi, Rashi at the bottom of the first column, 6 lines up from the bottom, says, Shama Vayishma HaKinaani, Shama Shemes Aharon, V'nistalku Ananei HaKavod. And this is what he heard. The Gemara Rosh Hashanah, which we'll talk about in a moment, quotes this. Okay, so this is what he hears, right here. However, if you look at the pasuk, it seems that Rashi's going out on a limb here. If I would ask you just pshat of the pasuk, what did this king hear? What would you tell me? Simple, read the pasuk. 100%. Okay? It's very simple. What does it say? The Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelled in the south, heard that Israel had come by the route of the spies. And there he goes, therefore he goes out to do battle. Right? He heard that Bnei Yisrael are coming, and therefore he goes out to do battle. Doesn't that make more sense than Rashi saying, what did he hear? He heard that Aaron had died, and the clouds protecting Bnei Yisrael had dissipated, and therefore he went out to do battle against them. I mean, isn't the pshat of the pasuk that this king, whoever he was, heard that Bnei Yisrael were coming? So what did he do? You hear that Bnei Yisrael are coming, you go out to do battle against them. What's this hearing that it was really, that Aharon had died, and that's why he went out? What is Rashi saying here? So this is a whole discussion in the Gemara in Maseches Rosh Hashanah. Okay, the Gemara, you might want to know, what is this doing in the Gemara and Maseches Rosh Hashanah? So if I would say to you, what month is Rosh Hashanah, what would you tell me? Okay, so September, because that's what we normally associate, right? The month of September-ish is Rosh Hashanah. But why September? Because Tishrei, right? We all think Tishrei. Okay, Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah, right? Any other Rosh Hashanahs? Five? Four. There are 4 Rosh Hashanahs, okay? Well, okay, so Tu B'Shvat. Let's see if you know them all. Okay, so Tu B'Shvat, right? So you know Tishrei, right? You know Tishrei. You know Tu B'Shvat, okay? Famous Tu B'Shvat, Chag Le'ilanot. Tu B'Shvat is the new year for trees. By the way, what does that mean, the new year for trees? Like trees, do they have a Yom Kippur also? Do they have a Sukkot? Like, right, where they put people on top of the Sukkah? I mean, right, what does it mean, Rosh Hashanah, for trees?
It must be harvest or starting to bud or give fruit or something.
When you first plant a tree, so you are not allowed to harvest the fruit of that tree for the first 3 years. Anybody know what that's called? It's right. It's called Orla. It's called Orla. It's interesting because I see lots of people going like this, right? I have learned that doesn't help, right? It just gives you a headache, right? Right? It's called Orla. It's called Orla. For the first 3 years after you plant a tree, you're not allowed to harvest the fruit of that tree. And it's interesting, how do you measure, planting a tree? So how many of you have ever planted a tree? Where'd you get the tree? Okay. Okay, J&F. Okay, J&F. Very good. You go out into the forest and they bring you a little sapling.
I didn't get my hands dirty.
Right, okay. And you plant the sapling. Okay. But if you've ever planted a tree here, I've had the schus of planting a tree in Great Neck. And what happens? You go to the nursery and you buy a tree. Right? You buy a tree. It's in a pot, right? It's burlap. You buy the tree. You try to fit it into your car to get it home, right? You get it home and you plant the tree. But is that tree considered planted from the moment that you planted it? Or is it considered planted from when, the nursery planted it, right? Where did the nursery get it from? So that's a very interesting question about how you keep these dates. But for the first 3 years, assuming you know when it began, or you don't use the fruit that comes from the tree for the first 3 years. Any of you have fruit trees? Okay, so this is an issue. By the way, some say this is the source for not cutting the child's hair for 3 years, right? Not cutting the child's hair for 3 years is connected to not taking the fruit from the tree for 3 years. Of course, all of my children, or I shouldn't say all of them, several of my children embrace this minhag as if it was Torah Misinai, right? In my generation, I don't know, you had to be Hasidish to do this, but today, Baruch Hashem, everybody's Hasidish, so they all do it. So we have this idea of Orla. That's good. So we have 2 Rosh Hashanahs: Rosh Hashanah Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah Tu B'Shvat. Anybody else? Nisan, right? What is Nisan? Right, Nisan is a Rosh Hashanah. It's how we count the months. So Tishrei is actually the 7th month. Nisan is the 1st month. We measure from the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim. If you look at your calendar, okay, we are counting clockwise, right? We're counting clockwise. Nisan is number 1. Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, number 7. Okay, so that's the 3rd one. Anybody know the 4th one? What? We did that already. Rosh Chodesh Elul. Right, Rosh Chodesh Elul is considered a new year for the Fruits and what?
To start yeshiva.
To start yeshiva. For New Year for tuition, right? For the fruits and vegetables, as to how you measure trumos and maisros, take it, you have to take from the harvest, so we measure it by Elul. Okay, so we have 4 New Years. So the Gemara in Maseches Rosh Hashanah is discussing Nisan as the first month for counting from Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay? First month for counting from Yetzias Mitzrayim. And it actually quotes our pasuk here. Why? Because we know that Aharon's death happened when? Hold this place and jump up to chapter 33, 918. Right? Chapter 33 is on page 918.
There's a map on page 920.
So we are looking at actually page 920. We've been to this page before when we talked about the journeys going back and forth. Okay? So look at verse 38. Verse 38 says, Vaya'al Aharon HaKohen El Hor Hahar, Al Pi Hashem, Vayamas Sham, Bishnas Ha'arba'im. When did he die? The 40th year, Shnas Ha'arba'im. Litzeis B'nei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim, B'chodesh HaChamishi. What is the Chodesh HaChamishi? Count, you have your charts in front of you.
Counting from Nisan?
Nisan is, use Nisan as number 1. What is Chodesh HaChamishi? Av Be'echad LaChodesh. Rosh Chodesh Av LaBriyut. Rosh Chodesh Av is the yard site of Aharon HaKohen. Rosh Chodesh Av.
And 7th of Av is, no, Av is Sunday.
7th of Adar is Moshe. Okay. So from page 920, verse 38, we know that Aharon died in the 40th year, and the 40th year in the 5th month, Av, on the first day of that month. Okay. So this is source number 1, which the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah quotes. Okay. Now I want you to jump ahead to. Let's see. I want you to jump ahead to Devarim, Perek Aleph, Pasuk Gimel. You have to use all your fingers here. Okay, 938. Vayihi be'arba'im shana. What does that mean? And it was in the 40th year. Bi'ashtei asar chodesh. What's ashtei asar chodesh? 11th month, right? In the 11th month, be'echad lachodesh, on the first of that month, diber Moshe el bnei Yisrael. Moshe spoke to the Jewish people. Kechol asher tziva Hashem oso alehem. Everything that Hashem had commanded him regarding them. Okay? Now, when is this? When, right? So count Nisan is number 1. And what do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Adar, right? If Nisan is number 1, am I right? Nisan is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm sorry, Shvat, right? Shvat, right? Rosh Chodesh Shvat, right? Shvat is, so we're talking about on the first of Shvat, Moshe Rabbeinu starts his address to Bnei Yisrael. How long does he speak for? He speaks for a month. Right? Next time you think a drush is a little bit long, all right? Right? Moshe Rabbeinu speaks for a month. How do we know that? To Bnei Yisrael. Remember, all of Chumash Devarim is Moshe Rabbeinu's speech to Bnei Yisrael. That is a month long. He starts, hi Ruth, good morning. He starts Chodesh Shvat, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and he goes until Zayin Ba'adar. He goes until the day he dies. Right? He goes until the day he dies. It's a long lecture to Bnei Yisrael. Okay? Assumingly he didn't speak continuously for those 40 days or 37 days, but every day he spoke to Bnei Yisrael. Every day he went over the history, went over the mitzvos for all of those days. Okay. Now, these two psukim are brought down in the Gemara, in Rosh Hashanah. They both mention the 40th year. One is the 5th month. One is the 11th month. One is Av, and one is Shvat. When would the 41st year begin? The 1st of Nisan. Could the year begin with Tishrei?
Yeah, of course.
No. Could the year begin with Tishrei? No. Why not? Because if we say the year began with Tishrei, when Moshe spoke to Bnei Yisrael in Shvat, it would already be the 41st year. Okay, put your finger on Av. Right, put your finger on Av. All right, the Torah tells us that's the 40th year. Right, that's the 40th year. And now you're going to move clockwise all the way up to Shvat. You're going to pass Tishrei. If Tishrei was the beginning of a new year, so what would Shvat then be? Not the 40th year, but the 41st year. So the Gemara in Maseches Rosh Hashanah uses these two psukim to tell us that the Rosh Hashanah for counting months, meaning the Rosh Hashanah from Yetzias Mitzrayim, is to be measured by the month of Nisan. Okay, that's what the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah is telling us about, that the month of Nisan is the first month in our calendar. It's the way that we start our calendar. It's not necessarily, it is one of the new years, but the new year for judging people is not Nisan, it is Tishrei. Okay. Now, in this Gemara, Tosfos, one of the commentaries on the Gemara, Rashi's grandchildren, Tosfos actually asks an interesting question. And because what does the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah say? The Gemara quotes our pasuk that the Kenaani, the king of Canaan, heard that Aharon had died, and he went up and he went to do battle against Bnei Yisrael. Says Tosfos, it must be. Remember, there are 2 times in Chumash where we have this phrase that the king of Canaan, Arad, heard that Bnei Yisrael, that Vayishma Melech Canaan. One is in our source, page 800 and 848, right? 848, Vayishma HaKenaani Melech Arad. That's one. And the other one is in Parshas Maseh, where we had just been. Okay, page 920, verse 40. Vayishma HaKenaani Melech Arad. V'hu Yoshev B'Negev Be'eretz Yisrael Bevo B'nei Yisrael. Okay, so what's the difference between these two psukim? The pasuk on 848, pasuk Aleph, Vayishma HaKenaani Melech Arad Yoshev HaNegev, writes, Ki Ba Yisrael. He heard that Bnei Yisrael were coming. Okay, he heard that Bnei Yisrael were coming. Hence our question, why does Rashi have to say he heard that Aharon died if what the Torah tells us clearly is that he heard that Bnei Yisrael were coming? the verse on page 920 doesn't say he heard that Bnei Yisrael were coming. The verse on page 920, verse 40 says, Vayishma Kanaani, the Kanaani heard, Melech Arad, V'hu Yoshev Baneged Be'eretz Canaan, Bevo Bnei Yisrael. He heard something while Bnei Yisrael were coming. What did he hear? Says Tosfos, this must be the correct verse that the Gemara was referring to when it says he heard that Aharon had died. Even though Rashi attributes it to our verse, right? Our verse on page 848, Rashi says, what did he hear? He heard that Bnei Yisrael died. Says Tosfos, no. Right? That's not what he heard. What did he hear? He heard that that Aharon died. Right? That's not what happened. What did he hear? He heard that Bnei Yisrael coming. Where do we have the drasha that he heard that Aharon had died? That must be the verse on page 920. Okay? So the reason I bring this to you is because if you're following Pshat, if we're looking at the simple meaning of the verse, Rashi seems to be going out on a limb here. Why does Rashi say he heard that Aharon died? What did he hear? He heard that Bnei Yisrael were coming. That's why he went out to do battle. What is Rashi referring to? So Rashi is referring to the midrashic interpretation, not on our verse here, but on the verse on page 920, Parshas Masai, where the Torah repeats this. That's where the drasha is. Rashi brings it here to put this in a context for us, right? So the king, this Kanaani, Melech Arad, hears that Bnei Yisrael are coming. And that's why he goes out to do battle. That's Pshat. On a deeper level, Rashi says, we learn from that other source on page 920, where the journeys of Bnei Yisrael are recorded. We learn that not only did he hear that Bnei Yisrael were coming, but he also heard that they were now vulnerable. Because there, it doesn't say he heard Bnei Yisrael were coming. He heard something while Bnei Yisrael were coming. And what was that? Not only did he hear they were coming, but he heard they were also now vulnerable. And therefore, he goes out to attack them. Okay, so just bringing this interesting for me, hopefully interesting for you, variation in sources, and a chance to review the Jewish calendar. By the way, this is always good to have. You should fold it up, put it in your pocket. Right? It's always good to have so that you know the months. When I was a kid, we had to memorize the months. I don't know if anybody, right? I don't know if anybody still does that, but right.
One has to assume that the Melech of Arad didn't really understand that, in particular, Aharon was connected to the Ananei HaKavod. He probably saw that the Ananei HaKavod
Correct.
were gone,
Right.
and connected the two events.
Correct. That's correct. I mean, why would he think that there was a connection between Aharon and the Ananei HaKavod?
I thought that only the Bnei Yisrael could see the cloud. Everyone could see the cloud.
I don't believe so. Okay, now we have the following. Okay, so that's the first piece. The second piece is, who is this Kanaani Melech Arad? Who is this Kanaani Melech Arad? So there are several ways to interpret these three words. Kanaani Melech Arad. The simplest way is to say that Arad is a place. He is the king of Arad. He happens to be a Kanaani. And he's dwelling in the south of Eretz Yisrael because that's where the Canaanim dwelt. Even though all of Israel was referred to at the time as Eretz Canaan, the primary dwelling place of the Canaanim was in the south of Eretz Yisrael. Okay. But we don't know who it is, right? We don't know who it is. We just know that he is a king of a place called Arad, and he was a Kanaani. Okay, he was a Kanaani. Why did he attack Bnei Israel? Because he thinks Bnei Israel are coming into the land. And therefore, he's going to go out to defend his country, right? To defend his territory. Bnei Israel are coming into the land from the south. That's what he thinks. So he goes out, like any king would do. He goes out and does battle against them. Okay? Now, this would not seem to be dependent on the clouds disappearing. In other words, if you're a king, you have a country, you're a king of a people, and there's a foreign people coming into your land, what are you going to do? You're going to go out and fight. Clouds or no clouds. You're going to go out and fight. In other words, you're not just going to turn tail and run, right? You're going to go out to fight. Maybe you're going to be defeated. Maybe you'll be victorious. You're going to go out to fight. How could you just turn around and run away? Right? You're going to go out to fight. Okay. So if we interpret this in its simple way, there was this place called Arad. It was in the south of Eretz Yisrael. It was where the Canaanim lived. There was a particular king there. He heard that Bnei Israel were coming, and he went out to do battle against them. Once we introduce the idea that Rashi introduces here from the other place, that he heard that the clouds disappeared, and maybe he associated it with Aaron, or maybe he didn't, but he heard that the clouds disappeared. So right away, there's a new question that's involved here. What does the disappearance of the clouds, why is that relevant for us to talk about when it comes to this king who is simply defending his turf? If all he's doing is defending his turf, excuse me, it shouldn't matter whether the clouds are there or the clouds are not there. But if it does matter whether the clouds are there or clouds are not there, maybe there's more to the story than just a king defending his turf. What is the more to the story part? What's the backstory?
The king know that Ananei HaKavod is Hashem, and so Hashem was with Bnei Israel, or Hashem wasn't with Bnei Israel. So if the clouds aren't there, Hashem's not there, and he can get them.
Okay, so why would he go to get them? If you say, like Pshat, right? If you say like Pshat, that Bnei Israel are coming into his territory, okay, so we understand why he's going out. But that would seem to be independent of whether there are clouds or not clouds.
But maybe he wouldn't go after them if the clouds were there.
What would he do?
He'd say, God is more powerful than me.
And he would run away?
He would let them pass.
What? No, they don't want to pass. They want to go. They're coming into the land to take the land. That's what he's thinking. That's if we look at Pshat. But if we look at it on this deeper midrashic level, and we say he sees that the clouds are not there, then maybe he's not simply going out to defend his land, but he's going out to attack the Jewish people.
There's an event.
Whether it's revenge or whether there's a vendetta, whatever it is, he is going out to attack Bnei Israel. In other words, if we introduce this concept already of the clouds disappearing, and that's connected to his going out, so then we're talking about a different level. In other words, on a simple level, we're talking about he's being threatened, and he goes out to defend his territory. But on a deeper level, on a midrashic level, he's going out because he sees the clouds have disappeared. Who would that be? Who would that be who goes out to attack Bnei Yisrael? Amalek. That's what gives rise to Rashi's interpretation here that who was this? This was Amalek. All right, this was Amalek. Amalek's job, right? Amalek's job is to attack and bother Bnei Yisrael. That's what Amalek does from the very first time that Bnei Yisrael and Amalek meet. When Bnei Yisrael, 40 years before that, when Bnei Yisrael left Egypt, it was Amalek who attacked them. 40 years later, when the clouds dissipate, Amalek says, now I have a chance to go hit them again. Right? So that's why Rashi says it's Amalek. But the problem is, if it's Amalek, why is he described as HaKena'ani? Amalek is not Kena'ani. So why is he described as a Kena'ani? You hear why Rashi is asking this question. So Rashi gives us this very troubling interpretation. What does Rashi say? That this Amalek king realized that he needs to confuse Bnei Yisrael. Because if he is clearly identified as Amalek, what's going to happen? Bnei Yisrael will pray that Hashem should hand over Amalek to them. And Amalek will lose. So what does he do? He disguises himself as a Kena'ani. He disguises himself as a Kena'ani. What does it mean he disguises himself as a Kena'ani? He speaks Kena'anit. If there's such a word. Right? He dresses like a Kena'ani. So what happens? So he's thinking to himself, oh, I got them now. If they daven that Hashem should hand over Amalek to them, right? In other words, no, I'm sorry. He said, I have them now because they'll look at me, they'll look at my soldiers, and what will they think? We're Canaanim. So Bnei Yisrael will daven that Hashem should hand over the Canaanim. Guess what? We're really not Canaanim. We're Amalekim. And therefore, their prayers will be ineffective against us.
But they need food.
What? Hold on, we're going to come to that. But first we're trying to understand Rashi's interpretation here. In other words, Rashi says, why did this king of Amalek, why is he described in the Chumash as a Canaani? Because he disguised himself as a Canaani, which raises this perplexing question. Are you going to ask the perplexing question?
Why wouldn't God? God knows that.
Oh, right, which
Because the Canaanim don't
God
know
knows
that God
that.
knows.
right, which raises this perplexing question. Who cares? In other words, if Bnei Yisrael, let's say you're doing battle against this nation, and you think they're Canaanim and they're Amalekim, and you're davening, Hashem, please hand over the Canaanim to us. Hashem is up there saying, I don't know, they're not Canaanim. They're not Canaanim. What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about, right? Is that feasible? Right? I mean, that's what Rashi is saying, right? Rashi seems to be saying that if you're davening for the wrong thing, then your prayers are not going to be effective.
Well, it's a
No, it's
that's
not
a
the right
message
thing.
Well, what are Bnei Yisrael? I mean, what is this setup? The setup, this king of Arad, right? This Amaleki is saying, and Rashi's bringing it down here, right? Obviously, Rashi wasn't alive when this king of Amalek attacked Bnei Yisrael, so he doesn't know what he was thinking. Rashi is interpreting the psukim, but Rashi seems to be invoking the principle that if you daven for the wrong thing, your prayers are not going to be effective.
But God, Israel is davening to be victorious against an enemy who's trying to defeat them.
I mean, you're right. In the end, that's what happens. But that's not what happens in the beginning, right? In the beginning, and Rashi tells us this is what the kavana of the king of Amalek, this person, this is what his kavana was. His kavana was to trick Bnei Yisrael. Now, if Rashi's bringing that down, it must mean that there is some value in tricking Bnei Yisrael, having them daven for the wrong thing. Because in the end, Rashi says, what happens? In the end, Bnei Yisrael were saying, well, he looks like a Kanani, but he acts like an Amaleki. So Bnei Yisrael just daven stam. They just said, hand over the enemy, and they were victorious, right? That's the next pasuk, okay? So Bnei Yisrael realized that. But the implication is, that if you daven for the wrong thing, it's not going to be effective.
Well, maybe the implication is that it might be more effective if you're on target with the name. Like when you're davening for a refuah for somebody, there is some benefit to know the Hebrew name, the Hebrew name of the mother, and to, rather than say, let John Smith have a refuah, you should say it's.
Okay, so I want to explore this construct a little bit more with you. Is it really true that if you daven for the wrong thing, by the wrong thing, and we'll see from some examples, that it's not effective, which sort of implies that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was up there saying, I don't know, that was the wrong thing, right? You better look at it again. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't know what we want. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't know that we want to be spared from this enemy. We have to name the particular enemy. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting for. Is that what is meant to be implied here? So it's interesting. The Meshech Chochmah refers to an interesting Gemara in Baba Metzia. The Gemara deals with the following case. I have lots of land, okay? And someone comes to me and someone wants to lease, I guess would be the proper term, a section of my land to farm, right? He's going to lease that land and he is going to plant in that land, he's going to plant wheat in that land, okay? He wants to lease the land and he's going to plant wheat in that land. So he makes a deal with the landowner, and the deal is every month I'll pay you $1,000 for the lease of that land. And obviously, what is he hoping? He is hoping that the crop that he harvests of the wheat that he plants in that land will be many times more than that and will enable him to pay the rent, let's say. Okay? I don't know how much wheat costs. I don't know. I'm just giving a number, okay? So that's the arrangement that he has, okay? That's what the Gemara in Bava Metzia says. He's called a socher. He's a renter of the land. Okay, now, let me ask you a question. You rent an apartment from a landlord, and the apartment becomes uninhabitable. Let's say, I don't know, there's a leak, right? A flood, the people above you, their bathtub overflowed, flooded your apartment is uninhabitable. Are you obligated to pay rent while the apartment is uninhabitable? The answer is no. You are not obligated to pay rent while the apartment is uninhabitable, right? That is the law. What's the reason for that? Makes sense. You're renting a habitable apartment. If the apartment is uninhabitable, so then you do not have to pay rent, which is why landlords try to fix these things very quickly so that they don't lose out on the rent. Okay, that's why they try to do that. And that's why there's insurance and all those other things. Okay, so now I rent this field. Let's say that there is it could be a drought, right? Or let's say that there's a windstorm. That's what the Gemara mentions, right? There's a windstorm, and the crops, and I planted something in the field, and the harvest is destroyed by the windstorm. Can I go back to the landowner and say, I'm not paying you rent because I rented a land that was supposed to be hospitable to growing crops? And here, what happened? And here is the land, right? Something happened. There's a calamity that happened. And the labriut, bless you, and the land is not hospitable to growing crops. Therefore, I'm not paying you rent.
Totally different.
Go ahead.
One, you're paying, when you buy the land,
Rent,
There's
lease.
There's no guarantee on weather and all the other things. The land is still there.
Right, the
But
land,
it's on the land.
the land is still there, but it's not hospitable to growing crops.
But
So
he
the,
can't- that's not the
Okay.
fault of the landlord. He can't correct anything.
I understand that, right? I understand that. But the halacha is that the leasee,
Leasing.
the one who does the lease, is he the leasee?
The one who has taken the lease.
The leaseor?
The lessor is the one who owns it, the
Right.
leasee is the one who's.
Okay, so the leasee does not have to pay, right, if something like that happens. That's the halacha. An interest, right? An interest. It's the halacha. Whether it's the law, I don't know, but it's the halacha. Okay, right? It's the halacha. Now, here's something interesting. So the Gemara discusses the following. Let's say that the leasee tells the leasor that he's leasing the field to plant barley. And what does he do? And instead of planting barley, he plants wheat. Now the Gemara questions whether he has a claim. Why? Because what can the leaseor claim? The leaseor can claim, listen, you don't have a claim against me. You still owe me the rent. Why? Because I davened for a field of barley. And you went ahead and planted wheat. If you had planted barley, the barley would have survived. Right? But you went ahead and planted wheat. So I was davening for barley. I was davening for you to be successful for barley. And in turn, you planted wheat. And that's why the crop, that's not my fault. Okay? In other words, my land was hospitable. My land would have been hospitable to that which you said you were going to plant. So the Gemara actually brings this as an example of someone who davens for something. What is this leaseor saying? The leaseor is saying, I davened for your success as a barley harvest, right? You planted wheat. I can't help that. So you're saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't know that the leaseor was davening for the success of this farmer, regardless of what he planted? No. So we are introduced to this concept that a person who davens for the wrong thing might actually not be effective with his tefillos. Yes?
אבל תמיד תהיה עם השם אלוקיך. You daven for something, even wrong. Hashem will accept it.
No, so I'm not. Listen, I don't have the teacher's manual. I don't know whether Hashem won't. I'm just basing myself on the sources that we have here. So it seems that the more specific we are with our tefillot, the greater the chance of our tefillot being heard. Not because Hashem doesn't know what we want. Right? Not because Hashem doesn't know what we want. Because we need to know what we want. So if I am davening so if I'm davening for a particular person and I don't have the right name for that person, that's problematic. I need to find out the right name for that person. The more specific my tefillos are, the greater is my kavana for that which I am davening. In fact, the Meshech Chochmah goes so far as to say that perhaps Bnei Yisrael didn't daven at all because Bnei Yisrael thought these were Canaanim, and Bnei Yisrael knows Hashem already promised them that they're going to be victorious over the Canaanim. So perhaps Bnei Yisrael didn't even daven at all because they assumed that they were going to be victorious over the Canaanim. Yes, Beverly?
But I draw a different conclusion than you. When you say you should be specific in your prayer, I would say the less specific you are and identifying the situation, at identifying the situation, gives you greater assurance that it will be the right prayer. For example, if the leaser had said, I'm praying for the success of the harvest of my leasee, then it didn't matter what he planted.
Right, but he doesn't say that. In other words,
No, but I'm saying that's a more general
no, listen,
term.
there's no question that that's what ultimately Bnei Yisrael did. Ultimately, Bnei Yisrael said, we're not sure who this is, so therefore we're going to daven stam, right? We're going to daven stam. Now that is, davening stam is effective, right? But I'm not talking about davening stam. I'm talking about davening for the wrong thing,
Yeah, so I'm
right?
sure you
And
did.
it seems that davening for the wrong thing might actually compromise that tefillah, which in a way is sending us a very powerful lesson about tefillah. The powerful lesson that we can learn from this about tefillah is that tefillah is as much dependent on us as it is on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, we are turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we are asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for something. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to see that we know what we're asking for. You know, we know what's important. We know what we're asking for. We're trying to be as specific as possible with what we're asking for. Because if I say, Hashem, just make me successful, all right? That's not nearly as powerful as saying, Hashem, make me successful in raising my children. Hashem, make me successful in raising my husband, or whatever it is, all right? In other words, right, as specific, right, Hashem, the more specific our tefillah is, the more focused we are on what we are asking for, for what we are asking, okay? And that's perhaps the lesson that we're being taught here. That the focus, right, it's not that Hashem didn't know what Bnei Yisrael wanted. Obviously Hashem knew what Bnei Yisrael wanted, and that was they wanted to defeat this enemy. But until they were able to be specific, which they weren't able to do in this case, so Hashem was not being responsive, right? When they were more specific, then Hashem was more responsive. It's just an interesting, I think it's an interesting insight into tefillah. Obviously, if you don't know the name of someone, so you do the best that you can. And yes, you can even daven for someone using their English name. You can, but the more specific you can be, if you know their Hebrew name and you know their father's name, or if you're a Sephardi, or their Hebrew name and the mother's name, if you're an Ashkenazi, So the more specific you can be in your tefillah, right? That's really the source of our minhag of changing the name of someone when they are very, very ill. Right? Because what is the idea of changing the name of someone? In other words, this is a different person. Right? I add the word Chaim or I add the word Chaya, it's a different person. It's a different person. Okay? Now, maybe Hashem says, all right, even for that different person, it's not going to work. But it's interesting. If you add a name to someone who's very, very ill, and that person doesn't recover, you do not consider the added name as part of the name of that person. The only time you consider the added name as part of the name of that person is if that person recovers. So we add the name Chaim to someone and he passes away, on the matzeva you don't write Chaim. Right? If he recovers and passes away a year later, then you write Chaim on the matzeva. It's an interesting halacha. But this, what? No, let's say his name was Ruvain Shalom. And he was very, very ill, and you added the name Chaim, so now he's Chaim Ruvain Shalom. So you would only write Chaim Ruvain Shalom on the matzeva if he recovered from that illness. If he didn't recover from the illness, you would just write Ruvain Shalom on the matzeva. And just an interesting...
Maybe he would have recovered had you given him a little more time, because maybe he meant to.
Okay. So that's just some interesting side pieces here. Last piece of the pasuk. What's the last piece of the pasuk? So says the pasuk, page 848. Vayishp mimenu shevi. Vayishp mimenu shevi. Okay? How does the English translate it? As, and took a captive from it. That's a little bit weird, isn't it? Took a captive from it. So look at, so you have the Ramban. Look at the English. The English brings the commentary of the Ramban, and Rashi says it as well. If you look at Rashi, the Ramban says it a little bit more specifically, but if you look at Rashi, Rashi is in the left column, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down from the top of the left column. Vayishp mimenu shevi, says Rashi, Eina ella shivcha achas. Right? What did this, right? Who did this king capture? One shivcha. What's a shivcha? A female servant. Right? One female servant. No, not a Jewish one. Right? One female servant. What's interesting is Rashi is saying, this was somebody who we captured. Right? In other words, how did you get a non-Jewish servant? Right? You got a non-Jewish servant because you captured a city and she became a servant. Right? This was somebody who we captured. They got her back, as if to say, no big deal. In other words, the comment of Rashi is almost as if to say, no big deal. Why? Right? Why is Rashi forced to say here? Or why is the pasuk telling us no big deal? All they got was a shivcha achas, who was not part of Bnei Yisrael at the very beginning. So interestingly, the Sifsei Chachamim, the commentary on Rashi, explains that the reason Rashi is saying this is because when does Bnei Yisrael lose a battle? When does Bnei Yisrael lose a battle? Only if they transgress, if they do something wrong. Look at the history of Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar, right? The history of Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar is when they transgressed, what happened? Plague. When they transgressed, the Nechashim, right? As long as Bnei Yisrael didn't transgress, they were fine. When they transgressed, something bad happened. So, do we read about any transgression here? No, we don't read about any transgression, says the Sifsei Chachamim. So if we don't read about any transgression, then this can't be bad. So if it can't be bad, how do we define it as not bad? They didn't get any of the Jews. Who did they get? They took back one maid servant who maybe came from them in the first place. Right? That's why it says Sifsei Chachamim. That's why Rashi says this. Right? Rashi's interpreting the pasuk because it can't be bad because we don't read about any transgression. We don't read about any transgression. So that's an interpretation. There is another interpretation that says, well, the truth is there really was a transgression leading up to this. What was the transgression leading up to this? There was no water. They complained about the fact that there was no water. Moshe and Aaron sinned. Aaron died as a result of that sin. So even if it wasn't direct, it was one of these, right? So there was a little bit of a transgression, but that's not what Rashi says, and we leave it with that. Next week, we'll talk about the prayer of Bnei Yisrael and were they victorious in that prayer. Are we on for next week? Everybody's here? Okay, see you next week.